Here's something wild. One of the strongest glues on Earth was created by scientists who were actually trying to make something completely different. And at first, they thought their invention was a total failure. And it only gets stranger from here. Picture this moment in history. It's World War II. Labs are rushing to invent new technology, and scientists are experimenting with clear plastics for precision gun sights. Serious mission, national urgency, not exactly let's invent arts and crafts supplies. One chemist, Harry Coover, and his team were mixing strange chemical compounds, hoping for a breakthrough. Instead, they made a goo that stuck to everything. Glass, metal, lab tools, probably their fingers too. Not exactly helpful when you're building delicate optics. They basically went, nope, useless. Into the reject pile it went. Science can be savage like that. At first glance, the story sounds simple. Superglue is a powerful adhesive. End of story. But here's the twist. The very thing that made it bad for their project was what made it extraordinary. This chemical, called cyanoacrylate, didn't just stick, it bonded instantly with almost anything it touched, especially in the presence of tiny amounts of moisture in the air. That's right, the air itself helps trigger the bonding. The scientists didn't want sticky, they wanted clear plastic, so they walked away from one of the most useful materials of the 20th century. But this is where it gets weird. Nearly a decade later, in 1951, Harry Coover was working at Kodak, still experimenting with materials. A colleague was testing a new compound using a refractometer, a device that measures how light bends through materials. Problem? The sample glued the instrument together. Most people would panic. Coover got curious. Instead of saying, this stuff is ruining everything, he realized, wait, this sticks without heat, pressure, or clamps. That wasn't a flaw, that was a superpower. Here's the truly absurd part. The glue worked best when surfaces had the tiniest layer of moisture. In other words, perfectly dry surfaces were the enemy. Normally, water messes up glue. This one, water activates it. The team had accidentally built a chemical that could form incredibly strong chains in seconds with almost no effort. Planned research, accidental miracle. And that triggered something nobody saw coming. Coover didn't just publish the discovery, he pushed to develop it into a product. In 1958, it hit the market as superglue. At first, people didn't know what to do with something that could bond skin, metal, rubber, and plastic in seconds. There were dramatic demonstrations where hosts lifted entire objects using just a drop. It looked like a magic trick, but behind the showmanship was a serious shift. Repairs no longer needed screws, nails, or long drying times. A mistake from a failed optics project had turned into a household essential. Then came the moment that changed everything. During the Vietnam War, medics began using cyanoacrylate sprays to temporarily seal wounds and stop bleeding in emergencies. Not the same formula as your hardware store tube, but the same chemical family. Something once tossed aside as too sticky was now saving lives, from rejected lab goo to battlefield medicine. But the real impact came later. Today, superglue and related adhesives are everywhere, fixing broken glasses, repairing electronics, model building, dentistry, surgery, even space equipment. You've probably used it during a tiny home disaster, a snapped charger cable, a cracked plastic handle, a shoe that gave up at the worst time. That instant bond we take for granted came from a scientist who didn't ignore an annoying failure. He investigated it. The big lesson? Mistakes aren't always wrong. They're sometimes just misunderstood. Curiosity turns accidents into breakthroughs. The difference between useless mess and world-changing invention can be one person asking, wait, what if this is actually important? And this isn't the only interesting hidden history. Subscribe to Curiosity Vault for more hidden stories like this.